Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast, is supported by a generous grant from the North Dakota Natural Resources Trust. If you would like to contribute to our on-the-ground conservation initiatives and our conservation internship and mentorship programs here in North Dakota, please consider making a donation to us through our member support link on our Spotify page. Your contributions will directly support the Walsh County Three Rivers Soil Conservation District, where this year we will plant over 10,000 trees and several hundred acres of conservation grass, pollinators, and cover crops, while also offering hands-on conservation job training to our high school and college interns. You can also support our efforts by liking, reviewing, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Thank you. Welcome to Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast. In this episode, we talk with Naeem Kalwar, Soil Health Specialist at the NDSU Langdon Research Extension Center. Naeem was born and raised in Pakistan, where his father was an agronomy professor at the local university, and his cousins and uncles farmed in nearby villages. Today, Naeem leads soil health programs in eastern North Dakota. Listen to the episode to learn how he cultivated a passion for soils at an early age, and to learn from his expert insights about the amazing and complex ways that soil is a living ecosystem that can heal itself if given the chance. This episode is particularly special to us here in Walsh County, because our conversation with Naeem inspired our $5.75 million grant proposal for a working lands cover crop initiative in the Red River Valley, which was recently selected by the National Association of Conservation Districts and is currently pending final approval from the USDA. The proposal provides 3 seasons of cost-share support to farmers and ranchers in the Red River Valley of North Dakota and Minnesota to replace monoculture crops, such as corn, wheat, and soybeans, with full-season multi-species grasses, and to incorporate livestock for grazing and haying. The grant also provides funds to build the local and regional markets supporting grass-fed beef, which also supports pollinators and grassland birds. As listeners to our previous episodes know, we have lost 53% of our grassland birds in North Dakota since 1970, and nearly all of the tallgrass prairie in the Red River Valley. By replacing monocrops with multi-species grass and livestock, this initiative seeks to regenerate the soils of the region by taking inspiration from how the soils were formed over thousands of years through a combination of diverse tallgrass prairies, bison and other large herd animals, and indigenous land stewards, including the Ojibwe and Dakota peoples, who continue to call the region home. Without further ado, let's start the show to get a masterclass in soil health with our colleague and friend, Naeem Kalwar. Soil is a precious heirloom in a way.
Yes.
It's something that is generationally passed down, the knowledge about it, and that it takes literally lifetimes to understand it, not one lifetime. There's more going on in 1 cubic yard of living soil than probably any of us can understand in 10 lifetimes,
Yes.
right? So you mentioned your dad, and I'm curious to get to the question of how far back does your personal interest in soil go? What's the origin story for, how do you get into soil?
So I come from an agricultural family. So in Pakistan, we call them villages versus city. These are very rural areas. The people living in villages are mostly farming the land. And that's how I saw it. So my dad was also farming with his brother and his dad. But then he went to college and then university, and he went to agriculture college. So he graduated in, I think it was 1968 or something, in agronomy. And then he did his one master's in agronomy and then second master's from Philippines in soils and then PhD. So my background was that I loved going to my village. And when I would go to village, what did my uncles do? They would farm. And I was like 6, 7 years old. I just loved the open outdoors and open everything and running around freely from the city. Where, it was a small city, but it was university town. So we were living in university housing. To me, I was very tied down. So village was much more open and, doing these things. So that's how my connection with the soils has started. In terms of why I ended up taking majors in soils, it is a funny story because first 2 years we were moving around, learning about agronomy, soils, horticulture, plant breeding. When I was about to take my majors, I had to pick out of these 4. My dad said to me, I do not want to see you in agronomy because I'm the professor here. So that would be a conflict of interest.
Sure.
So I grudgingly took soils as my major. I was not happy about it. I said, okay, so you don't want to see me in agronomy, I won't be here. I took the soil, but I think that was an accident. But I think that's one of the best things that has happened to me in my life. Because I started then not only liking soils, but if I look back, and even today, if I think about that, and I would pose the question to you, you think about it. We all need food. We talk about food. Where are you going to grow the food? They talk about hydroponics, but which is the most sustainable way to grow food?
Yeah, I mean, I try to say this all the time, that I look out into the universe at night. We're in one of the rare places that gets true dark here.
Yeah.
And I don't see another Earth around. You know, what makes Earth a place that is teeming with biological life is soil, sunlight, and water. You know? And so, and that soil is maybe the least. It's the most used, and in some ways it seems, people like you have a deep understanding of it, but it seems, we call it dirt. I mean, we diminish it to being this sort of inert matter when that's not it at all. There's all kinds of things happening in soil. So.
Yeah, I know dirt is a very loose word, and I'm fine,
Sure,
I understand people don't mean, sometimes farmers don't mean anything that, is not worth anything. But to me, dirt is some unwanted dust you're cleaning off your desk or window pans or, something like that. Soil is something alive. Microbes are living there. Plants are, you plant the seed and then grow. And it's wonderful to see, a piece of land where nothing is growing and then suddenly you have a crop growing, Right. If you look at the old civilization, again, going back to history, in the old civilization, they used to live around the water to grow food.
Yes.
And when the water source would go down and they couldn't grow the soil, or the soils were destroyed, a lot of civilization destroyed their soils. Yeah. Civilization got destroyed.
Yes.
Same thing here. To me, I'm glad that I could actually help agronomists, because where are they going to grow their crops? People talk about disease and weeds, but you got to have a soil first to grow crop, and then worry about weeds and diseases, So to me, that's the basis. You cannot replace topsoil, for example. If you lose your topsoil, which we have been losing a lot, but that's how we also learn from our mistakes. I won't blame any generation.
Totally.
They tried to do their best during the times they knew what to do, so we think, our generation, my generation, think that we know how to improve the soil health, or, how to treat our land the best way, but future generation might come back and have a better way.
Sure.
I think as long as the intentions are good and the heart is in the right place, we're good. you know. So the main focus should be we should protect our soil. But like you said, how many generations this land has seen, even though these soils are young, compared to say some older civilization where soils have been farmed for 2,000 years, for example.
Yeah.
Here it's like, I don't know, 150, something like that.
Right.
You know, so these are we actually have one of the best soils in the world here.
Yeah.
You know, prairie grasses and bison. That combination led to very, very highly productive with very deep topsoil. We have lost a lot of topsoil, but if we acknowledge that mistake and then try to do things to at least first prevent the bleeding process, and then start doing things which will help build, or it's going to take some time. Some people may not be able to see that improvement in their lifetimes, but again, when you plant a fruit tree, you probably might not eat the fruit in your lifetime, but you're planting it for somebody else. To me, when we are protecting the land, this is about the future people, existing people too, but the future people as well. My name is Naeem Kalwar. My work title is Extension Soil Health Specialist. We are right here at the Langdon Research Extension Center in Langdon, North Dakota, and we are in my office.
You have a lot of books on soil in here.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of, are there like seed samples and other things that you have in the office?
We do have some seed samples in the front.
Yeah.
The other seed you see here, I was just playing with wheat grain to simulate some hands-on demonstration on how water moves through the soil layers. So I play with these things sometimes to create a visual for people.
I remember actually seeing at a demonstration that you did that with wheat. Could you just kind of talk us through how you use wheat kernels to demonstrate how water moves through soil?
Would you want me to get the jars?
Sure, yeah, why don't we?
Why don't you grab all of them?
Okay,
and then
sure.
I'll explain it to you.
Sure, yeah.
It all started essentially due to soil salinity issues we have throughout the states. So the white salt crust we see, nothing is growing, our very poor crops, stands. That all started it. Soil Conservation District actually also pushed big time to have these positions created. So there's a lot of credit goes back to Soil Conservation Districts. So soil salinity, it was right there, it was acknowledged. There are two more issues. I'm going to try to explain it to you by using wheat kernel and wheat flour.
Yes, please.
And then these are by no means complete answers or examples, but I try to use wheat a lot to help people understand these issues. So soil salinity, it's related to water-soluble salts. Salts move up and down with water, whether it's capillary rise of groundwater towards the higher ground or the topsoil, or whether it's gravitational water pushing the salts back into the deeper depths. Water is the key, and then water table or groundwater depth, you have to maintain that. Third important thing is how the water moves through the soil. And we call it soil water infiltration. Water will move good if you have good soil particle aggregation. That will lead to good structure and good porous space. There are some issues that happen in the soil caused by, say, excess sodium. So we are not talking about excess sodium that is free in the soil water. Exchangeable sodium, if it becomes higher than calcium, what it does is sodium has one positive charge. It attracts negatively charged clay or humus particles, and then it detaches it from the soil aggregates, and size of the soil aggregates keep smaller and smaller. It's like you turn wheat kernel into wheat flour. Okay, so this is why this wheat kernel, dry kernels, I consider that as a healthy soil. Kernels are representing here in this example soil aggregates that brings you good structure, and there's good pore space, or some people I've heard saying air pockets. Okay?
Yeah,
Whatever you want to call them.
Sure.
That's good. But the concept is that if you pour the water through this jar, it will get to the bottom quickly because of good aggregation, structure, and pore space. When you have excess exchangeable sodium versus calcium, it's like you're grinding those wheat kernels into wheat flour. The more you grind them, so you see this wheat flour, this would be much more denser because of the smaller size of the kernel, or you basically crushed it. I try to represent that as soil aggregates. So the porous space in this would be very small. It's not enough for the water to move. So if we pour the water through this jar, it will take for it a long time to get to the bottom. So this is a dispersed soil, or soil affected by sodicity. And this is a normal soil. Third issue, which is not very acknowledged, and I would say that some people even differ with me on that, is higher levels of exchangeable magnesium versus calcium. And I'm not talking about equal levels. I'm talking about, I've seen 2-3 times higher exchangeable magnesium levels versus calcium. Now, magnesium has 2 positive charges like calcium, so it could promote soil particle aggregation. But magnesium has a higher hydrated ionic size, and when it's trapped between the soil clay sheets or layers, and when it opens up the space between the clay sheets, that lets more water seep through, and that leads to swelling, not dispersion by like sodicity, swelling of the soils, especially if we have shrinking and expanding type of soils, which we have. So what I did. So these are dry kernels. These are wet kernels. So wet kernel, after absorbing the water, swell. That pore space, which is in there, now shrank. So the water, the way it would move to the bottom in this jar, the movement would be much slower here. So it all boils down to water movement. What I'm trying to say, whether your soil is dispersed due to sodicity, or swell due to high levels of exchangeable magnesium versus calcium, in both cases your water infiltration would be greatly reduced. And that's a big soil health issue, especially when you're fighting excess water. And it makes actually salt issue worse, because salts are supposed to go down. But if your infiltration is poor, the water would just sit in the top. Salts will also not move into the deeper depths. And the plants will not have a good, healthy growing environment, because the longer excess water sits in the soil pores, there's lack of oxygen now. There's a healthy ratio of oxygen and water in the soil pores. So when it rains, most of the soil would be saturated, but the excess water goes down and the air comes back into the soil pore. But the longer the excess water persists, oxygen cannot come down. And that's also a very unhealthy growing environment for microbes, soil microbes. So overall, you want this soil, you don't want this or that. The difference between compost and manure is that compost is a little bit broken down. That breaking down of the process, I would like to see that happen in the soil, not in a manure pile. If you're using manure or compost as a fertilizer, the nutrient levels in compost would be much more stable compared to manure. So as a fertilizer, as an organic fertilizer, compost would be a better choice than organic matter. But as a soil health amendment, manure is better.
I see.
So anything which will promote biological activity. You could plant cover crops, and I'm not talking about cover crops after harvesting, say, your regular annual crops, because most years you're going to get 6-inch, deep or long, tall growth. To me, if you have access to livestock, you should plant full season cover crop. You should include them in your rotation. We have a short growing season. Then you're going to see what kind of a growth you could get. And you'll get your dollars back in the first year. Because you could actually, if you planted your cover crop mix, just like any other crop in May or, late May, early June, you could either get 2 grazings or 2 cuttings of hay, or a mix of grazing and hay. I know some producers who have done that, not too far from here, and very successfully. So their animals got very good feed, and you're adding a lot of diversity. The longer the plants will grow above the ground, the deeper the roots are going to grow below the ground. So yes, to summarize the answer for your question, it was a long answer. To turn back this wheat flour into wheat kernels, yes, you could do it. Try to promote chemical aggregation of soil particles, biological aggregation of soil particles, and try to minimize soil disturbance. And that I'm talking about tillage especially. A long time ago, erosion, loss of the topsoil, was only recognized through two sources, wind erosion and water erosion. Recently, or not really recently, but when I say recently, I'm talking about last 20, 25 years at least.
Sure.
Tillage has been recognized as a big tool. So tillage not only will cause erosion, say if you're tilling down the hill, you're dragging topsoil from the hilltop to the, lower areas, but it will also enhance wind and water erosion because you're loosening up the soil. Now it's more exposed or vulnerable to wind and water erosion. Right. So these are some of the things we could do. Losing anything can take much less time. Building anything will take a longer time.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. But yes, these processes are reversible. I saw a documentary about 1930s Dust Bowls on Amazon. Right? Yeah. I saw it myself. I heard about it. I heard Dave Frenzen talk about it and looking at those pictures. That was terrible. But I saw that documentary. In that documentary, soil conservation districts were actually planting in strips of cover crop. That's what they came up with in 1930s and 1940s.
Yes.
Whatever concepts we are talking about today are not new, by the way.
Yes.
This is not something I came up with. These were all tried and tested. These are proven. Even the salinity and sodicity, that has been mentioned in 1960s in NDSU extension publications.
Yes. What's remarkable about that last point is that in preparation for this job, taking it on, I mentioned before we started that I'm a PhD in American literature and a writer, so pretty out of my depth when it comes to thinking this in depth about soil. And so I wanted to learn where I am. And so I started doing some research at the Carnegie Public Library in Grafton, and I went back into the old newspapers. And then I also went to NDSU's archives because I'm a grad of there for my undergrad. And I found exactly what you're talking about, those old extension books that show back in the 1930s using cover crops, using minimum till, strip till, or no-till methods, using biostrips, like all these things that we sort of talk about as being like new ideas have actually, we've been doing them for a long time and had demonstration sites about them for a long time. So I think that's a really important point.
And this brings one point in my mind, no information should be got rid of. And I actually have my favorite saying is, good information never gets old.
Right.
And history, we need to have the historic perspective right in front of us. Last 2021, when we had a dry year, the old timers said this year was very similar to 1988, for example. I heard a lot of farmers said that. 1988, I was 18 years old, going into university in Pakistan. I did not know much about it. So then I started asking them questions, what kind of a weather you faced? They said it was very similar, 1988, 2021 and 1988. You see, this is important because then you start learning, okay, what did people do at that time to face those issues? So to me, we all say, oh, this is not new information. One of the best books written about soil, by American scientists, is The Nature and Properties of Soils. First edition was written in, say, 1930s or 40s. I was in Pakistan, and my dad gave me his 7th edition in 1989. When I got here, I purchased 13th edition, which is right there. And now the 15th edition is out. The original writers are dead, or maybe one is alive. He was close to 100
Wow,
years old.
wow.
So what I'm saying is that you could build upon the knowledge, but never get rid of the knowledge, because those people spend a lot of time. So today, say for example, whatever I'm doing here, with the help of all others, one person cannot do anything. So I want to emphasize on that. Last 12 years, we have developed some good programs here, good projects, demonstration, and research trials. If I go from here, and 5 years down the road, and people would say, we want something new, the work we have done, there is some value to it. You could always build upon that, but, why should new person should come in and start doing the same thing all over again? They could learn from what we have already done, and then focus on something which we are not doing. Then they could, merge everything, and then the outcome would be good.
You've studied soil and worked with soil in lots of parts of the world. I know that you studied in Canada, Ontario.
Yeah.
You studied in Pakistan. You work now here at the Langdon Research Extension Center. And with all that work that you've done, I'm wondering, is soil still something that is humbling to you?
Yes. I've been here for 12 years, and I can tell you this much. I don't think that I even know 1% about soils, personally speaking. Yeah. People can claim whatever they want for themselves. This is my disclaimer about myself. I'm still learning, and I think that we know in some fields, like soil chemistry, like fertility and everything, nutrients, a lot of research has been done, but when it comes to soil microbes and, physical properties, how long it changed when you want to transition from conventional till to no-till, every area is different, soil type is different, then this soil property will actually show us improvement, this and that. We know a little bit, but if I have to summarize my knowledge, I would think, even if I would know for sure that I know 1%, I'll be very happy.
And how would you describe your kind of teaching philosophy or teaching method when it comes to educating people about soils?
So when I got here, to be honest with you, I knew the basic principles of the soils, but every area, even this area here, the soils around Langdon would be a little bit different than, say, Park River. So I never lived in this part of the world. So I came in here. To me, the best way to learn about a culture, I'm a big believer in, mixing with other cultures. I always was fascinated by Western cultures. And I was always thinking that I would like to live one day in a different culture, just to experience. We are ultimately all humans. But, every country, every region has a certain type of culture or practices. So what I did, this is my therapy. So when I get bored in the summer here, most of the time I'm out of the office in the field, but when I get bogged down by this computer or this desk or this room, I go out to do some work, on my projects here at the center, or I love going out meeting the farmers in the field. And that has actually given me a lot of knowledge about how their soils are, what kind of problems they are facing. And then whatever, I've also seen that, say if we are presenting in front of 100 farmers or 50 farmers, most people won't ask you the questions. But when you go to their farm, on their turf, they're more comfortable. When people are comfortable, they'll talk to you. So then they open up, and they have, over the years, people have been very generous towards me by sharing their experience with me. I would like to say that I've learned more from people compared to what I have told them. I have learned myself more. I've gained more than what I've given to people. So that is the most satisfying. This was the most satisfying part of my job in Pakistan too, when I worked with farmers. I'm not really cut out for a corporate culture, to be blunt. And I did not like the corporate culture. Pay was good and everything, but the corporate culture is not my type of personality. But the farmers, when I used to go with farmers, that was my therapy. I would forget about my issues and I would just focus on the job. I enjoyed it. But here I would say I have a better balance between professional and personal life. But so when I go out in the field, it's like, to me, it's like I'm going on an outing. And I share and I learn, and then I come back. When we are presenting, say wintertime, we cannot really go out in the field. That is also a good time because you get to meet a lot of people. Farmers have more time, when they are not hauling grain, for example, doing other things, they come to the meetings. That is also a good time for social networking. I strongly believe in in-person interaction. I think Zoom and other things are complementary. If you build a good relationship like you and me, then if we connect through Zoom or telephone, we'll connect much better. But first time if we talk, I don't know, it will still work. I mean, we made Zoom work during the COVID times. But would I prefer sitting right in front of you versus just talking to you about these things via Zoom only? I would prefer this.
What makes North Dakota, or this part of North Dakota, so exciting for someone who's interested in soil?
I personally think that considering everything, we have one of the best soils in the world around here. And I think we are blessed with these soils. That's a natural resource. I think all farmers have good intentions. The only thing I'm just going to emphasize on that when we are farming, we should also think about not just this year. We should also think about so like if you are running a business, you will always be investing back into your business for it to thrive, keep thriving for you. We have soil, land, we farm it, we harvest, get things out of it. Think from this perspective, if there is a practice which may cost you a little bit, but then it'll give you return in the future. Not only it'll give you the return in your lifetime of farming, but if you want to pass the land on to your son, your daughter, your grandkids, anybody, think about this, that they could still make the same kind of a living. So land is it's not like something which is just going to go away. You pass it on. So you think about what you're going to pass it on to the people in the future.
Can you talk just a little bit more about the importance of animal diversity in soil health? I mean, you spoke to the animal manure, but even the hooves and all the rest of that goes into it, and how that can that work in, because I hear a lot, that's not something that we can do in the big production agriculture. I mean, is it something that you can? So
we have mostly become monocropping culture here. So just crops. If you have, say, for example, if you have a crop farmer and then you have a rancher with some animals, because crop farmers, if they plant the cover crop, they like to know that, for example, that cover crop will bring some nutrients back into the topsoil. But the data suggests that it doesn't just happen in 2-3 years. So they want to know how long it'll take, for example, because they want to see those dollars back. Okay, if you have livestock, or if you partner with a person with livestock, and say if you planted full season cover crop. So number one, from that landowner or crop farmer perspective, if you made a mix, for example, which is good for grazing and haying, now you're looking at, and I'm not talking about 10, 12 species in that cover crop mix, affordable. 5, 60 species can make a very good cover crop mix. You plant it, say depending upon the spring, say mid-May or late May, those plants will thrive. They'll get like 4 or 5 feet height. And think about the root growth too. So when you multiply or add plant diversity, you think about you're also adding microbial diversity. You're not seeing it above the ground, but that's happening below the ground. And then comes your neighbor or your cows, graze it or hay it. So you got your dollars back in the very first year. But the soil benefit is going to stay with the landowner. And so you could easily either cut the cover crop or harvest the cover crop, full season growth. And with full season, so you got 3-4 feet of growth, you cut it, and the regrowth would again be that high. You think about that when you have that much above the ground growth, how much would be the below the ground growth, depending upon what type of cover crop mix you have. And so you'll get your dollars back because you'll get, if you own the animals, your animals will gain weight, or if you're partnering with a rancher, you'll get the paid. Now, fencing is not a big issue in today's world. Water could be an issue. So there could be some logistical, issues you need to figure out. But that's the best thing, in my view, can happen to a soil. Because again, I'll go back to the mix of prairie grasses with bison. What did bison do? Prairie grasses, perennial. They would come, mob graze them. Their hooves, actually. So hoof action is very important for soil health. So if you have a garden and you put a thick mulch, you will see that the bottom part of that mulch will start breaking down. Mulch layer will start getting thin from the bottom, not from the top. Why? Because that part is in contact with soil particles. That's where the microbes are. When hooves push, the cover crops or any plant into the soil, now that part of the land is directly in touch, or the cover crop or the plant residue is directly in touch with soil particle. That means microbes. And we only talked about the manure. So you get the manure spread free on your soil. You don't have to haul it from anywhere. You don't even need a spreader. But the livestock urine actually has some benefits too for the soil. So to me, that's the ideal. I cannot really talk about soil health if I don't mention anything about livestock. To me, that's a win-win situation. Now, I understand a lot of people, most people, households, farmsteads in the old days had animals. But then they got away from that, Now we could buy the milk from the store. And it's a lot of work. It's throughout the year, So I understand some people don't want to get into that. But the people who have livestock, crop farmers and ranchers, can partner. And ultimately, I would tell you that livestock is very crucial for maintaining and improving soil health. I don't even have the right words to emphasize it enough that we should have the livestock.
Thank you for listening to our conversation with Naeem Kalwar. Stay tuned for our next episodes, which will feature a range of exciting guests, including folks from Ducks Unlimited, the United Prairie Foundation, the Land Institute, and local farmers and ranchers. This is Josh Anderson, signing off for Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast. Common Ground, a Prairie Podcast, is supported by a generous grant from the North Dakota Natural Resources Trust. If you would like to contribute to our on-the-ground conservation initiatives and our conservation internship and mentorship programs here in North Dakota, please consider making a donation to us through our member support link on our Spotify page. Your contributions will directly support the Walsh County Three Rivers Soil Conservation District, where this year we will plant over 10,000 trees and several hundred acres of conservation grass, pollinators, and cover crops, while also offering hands-on conservation job training to our high school and college interns. You can also support our efforts by liking, reviewing, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Thank you.